This is a map of the world. And this is Ken Takahama. His parents are from here, but he grew up here. A few years back, he gained employment here, which made us coworkers, albeit briefly. Because of his employment here, he now lives here. Ken Takahama plays Magic the Gathering and is pretty good at it. Last summer, he won a modern RCQ here with Blue-Red Murktide. RCQ stands for Regional Championship Qualifier, and a win qualifies you for a regional championship, which is a big invitation-only Magic tournament held at Dreamhack, which as far as I can tell is a thing Zoomers go to vape at each other and do other dumb shit. At each regional championship, some percentage of the top finishers qualify for the next stop on the Pro Tour, and the top 2 finishers qualify for the World Championship. The idea is to provide a path from playing in locals to playing at the highest level against the best competition planet Earth has to offer. Which brings us here. Armed with steam vents once again, Ken Takahama stands alone as the only undefeated player after day 1. His Pro Tour qualification is all but clinched, but if he can just go 2-1-1 the next day, he's going to lock a spot in the top 8. So, he does. In the quarterfinals, Ken faces Derek Davis on an 80-card blue-white control deck sporting Yorion as its companion. Despite the nightmare pairing of a trio of main deck Narset alongside a trio of sideboard Rest in Peace, Ken pulls off the 2-0 sweep, resulting in a semifinals pairing against Lotus Field, with the winner not only making a big jump in prize money, but also earning a qualification to the 2023 World Championship, 10 months from today. Despite Blue-Red Phoenix's blend of soft permission and a decent clock, they typically don't add up to enough pressure to close the door before Lotus is able to do its thing, which is make a lot of mana, draw a lot of cards, and cast Approach of the Second Sun twice, all in the same turn. However, in Game 3, John Tashian's deck simply didn't cough up the goods, multiple turns in a row, allowing Ken Takahama to stamp his ticket to Worlds. Ken Takahama lost to Matthew Sapoff in the finals, but it's safe to say he got what he came for. 3 months later, he's off to the city of brotherly love for his first Pro Tour, Tour Phyrexia. I had the privilege of rooming with Ken in an Airbnb for this tournament. It was somewhere around here. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to provide him with much useful advice. He voiced concerns about being able to remember his previous picks in a timed draft, to which I replied, "You should just remember the cards you took." I don't know, man. I'm a YouTuber. I don't know what you should realistically expect from me, but in his first Pro Tour, Ken limps into day 2 with a 4-3-1 record, notching only one more victory on the weekend. But again, it's his first Pro Tour. You can't all be Randy Bueller. Another feature of regional championships is that if they qualify you for a Pro Tour, then you queue for the next RC as well. So, less than 2 months after the Pro Tour, it's off to play Standard in San Diego. It should be noted that at least in the United States, this is the first time since organized play started back up that a tabletop Standard tournament has mattered, and even this one's invite only. But Ken's always loved Standard, and so I picked up Esper Legends, charged on in, and holy shit, dude, really? Once again, Ken Takahama sits atop the standings, bringing his total record in regional championships to 22-2-1. He's back on the Pro Tour, and even though the rest of this tournament is a free roll for him, he's still in excellent shape to make top 8 again, which he does. This time, Ken gets bounced in the quarters, but he's already qualified for Worlds and the next Pro Tour, which takes place the very next month. It's Standard, And with Esper Legends, Ken Takahama once again limps into day 2 with a 4-4 record, but from there, he goes on a tear, finishing 9-7 and qualifying for the next Pro Tour Lord of the Rings, all the way over here. This Pro Tour doesn't go nearly as well, but certainly not for a lack of trying. In his previous 3 Pro Tour stops, Ken was able to network with other aspiring PT gamers and join a testing team of like-minded folk from all over the world. They're not Team Handshake, Team Ultimate Guard, or any of the other marquee teams that get lots of exposure thanks to the Pro Tour coverage team, but they're putting in the same effort and have the same motivation, laser focus, and dedication. 2 months later, it's time. Now, the prize for Worlds is impressive on its own, but the stakes are much higher than that. The first prize at the World Championships comes with an opportunity to immortalize yourself on a card, which is undoubtedly top of mind for Ken Takahama, whose reliable Esper Legends deck contains 4 copies of Fairy Mastermind, a card that only exists because Ken's favorite Magic player, Yuta Takahashi, won Worlds 2 years ago. Additionally, Ken's coming in knowing full well that his Pro Tour run could very well be over at this tournament. Of course, Ken Takahama is not letting any of the context swirling around the tournament cloud his vision. He's a methodical player at a baseline, and he tends to start Pro Tours slow, so there's no reason to think anything different's going to happen here, which makes his 6-1 finish on day 1 all the more impressive. He's primed to make a run, and despite a disappointing 1-2 start with a busted draft deck, he's got 2 top 8 win-ins incoming. In his round 13 match against Japan's Kazune Kosaka, Ken Takahama is figuratively and literally sweating. He's on the draw, but his Denick into Rafine draw is able to keep up with Kosaka's blistering Ardent Veil Fealty into Wedding Announcement start. Kosaka deploys a second Wedding Announcement, but Ken keeps his foot on the gas, sending both creatures in despite facing down 4 tokens that are all perfectly capable of blocking, effectively turning his hand into a semi-bluff. It gets through. Ken passes with 4 mana up as opposed to deploying Edgar Markov, continuing with the story that he's got removal, which he does in the forms of Cut Down and a Ganjo, in addition to an Otawara that he can channel for 2 mana thanks to his board of 2 legends. This would be a fine position, but Kosaka peels the perfect card given how Ken's played it, the Wandering Emperor. Kosaka's hand is now bursting with powerful cards, and they all play at instant speed, which allows him to conceal his Make disappear. Once Ken gets priority in Kosaka's second main phase, he Otawaras the Wedding Announcement that has 1 invitation counter on it, meaning, if Kosaka wants to replay the second Wedding Announcement, he's going to lose access to all those juicy instant speed spells during Ken's turn. If Kosaka doesn't replay the Wedding Announcement, that's going to heavily signal to Ken what's going on in his hand, which is exactly the choice Kosaka makes, meekly passing the turn with a known Wedding Announcement in hand and 4 mana up. Knowing that he's likely facing down a Wandering Emperor, Ken still charges in with both creatures, with the knowledge that a Wandering Emperor out of Kosaka will clear the way for his Ao, the Dawn Sky. Is it Ao or Ao? Great. Instead, Kosaka casts his second Ardent Veil Fealty of the game to chump block the 4/5 Denick and fall to 10, which, coincidentally, is 2 hits from Ao. From Ao. Fuck. Despite this, Ken passes the turn with 5 mana up, respecting the Make disappear that Kosaka is all but guaranteed to have. Kosaka flashes in his last Ardent Veil Fealty on Ken's end step, but lacks an untapped land to redeploy Wedding Announcement and hold up Make disappear, so the 2 players' dance continues, with no one willing to commit to anything during their own main phase. Despite the life total discrepancy, this pacing clearly favors Kosaka, whose hand still contains both Make disappear and the Wandering Emperor. Ken peels Voidrend, a fine card that nonetheless doesn't really help him force more damage or spells through on this board. It's on this turn that Kosaka finally commits to the quadruple block on Denick, knowing that if Ken taps out for anything to save it, he's got the trump card in the Wandering Emperor. Indeed, the quad block triggers Voidrend on the Wedding Festivity, as well as an Iganjo on the last 2/2 from Kosaka's trio of Ardent Veil Fealties, prompting him to exile the 4/5 Denick with the Wandering Emperor. From there, a top deck go for the throat on Ken's 3/6 Rafine ends any hope Ken had of clawing back. The first action of Game 2 is a wedding announcement from Ken that gets hit with a Make Disappear. When Kosaka simply plays a land and passes the turn, Ken resolves to keep jamming, and this time it's Edgar Charmed Groom. All Kosaka can do is stare at the negate in his hand that he neglected to target the wedding announcement with, and Edgar resolves. Kosaka's got an Ardenvale fealty on Ken's end step, but not much beyond that, as he simply plays a land and passes the turn back. But in reality, Kosaka's hand is loaded. Beyond the negate, Kosaka's holding Shieldred, wedding announcement, and double Wandering Emperors. Looking down at Make Disappear, Farewell, wedding announcement, a second Edgar, and a land, Ken Takahama dutifully charges his Edgar into 4 open mana. The rest of this turn goes according to Ken's script. He counters Kosaka's Wandering Emperor, deploys wedding announcement, and passes the turn. For the first time in this game, Kosaka deploys a card in his main phase, his second Wandering Emperor, and exiles Edgar with it. On the surface, Kosaka's choice seems to play right into Ken's holdings, but Kosaka's hand is still juiced, and he ripped a Go for the Throat to add to his embarrassment of riches. Ken peels Void Rend to go with his Farewell, and after Kosaka chump blocks Edgar, he points Void Rend at Wandering Emperor. This game is now in a tight spot. Ken's clearly got the board covered, and if Kosaka casts his Shieldred, Ken can reset the board with Farewell, unless Kosaka draws an untapped land, which would allow him to cast Shieldred and leave negate up. And he does. At this point in the proceedings, Ken almost certainly knows about the negate, given Kosaka's brief moment of hesitation when Ken slammed Edgar on turn 4 in a match that Kosaka has otherwise played blisteringly quickly. This slow, off-tempo waltz Ken does with his basic lands on this turn is very familiar to those of us that get to play against Ken in locals, but now he's in the blender on camera, down a game, with a spot in the top 8 of Worlds hanging in the balance. Ken opts to cast his freshly drawn Rafine and sends Edgar straight into Shieldred, drawing Go for the Throat off of Rafine's trigger. Ken discards Farewell, making Edgar a 6/6. Before blocks, Ken attempts Go for the Throat, the last card in his hand, on Shieldred, which Kosaka negates. Ken then playfully suggests that Kosaka block Edgar with Shieldred, prompting some laughter from Kosaka before he takes 6, casts Virtue of Loyalty from exile, and from there, the game is effectively over. Ken Takahama just lost his first standard match at Worlds at the worst possible time. 1 win and in down, 1 to go. All we get to see of Ken's second win and in is a bit of Game 3, culminating in both players revealing their hands and Ken eventually conceding, since they were about to head to turns and a draw would be bad for both players. I have no idea why the Pro Tour broadcast team chose to show that, but there you go. After a phenomenal run that included a 6-0 start in Standard, Ken Takahama's tournament ends not with a bang, but with a whimper. Ken Takahama finished Worlds in 12th place. Given the prize difference between 5th through 8th and 9th through 16th, it's something he can live with. Besides, he had an objectively amazing year. A year that started here, Dragon Master Games, Binghamton, New York. A local game store indistinguishable from any other local game store. I mean, it's a nice place, don't get me wrong. I don't know. I'm the wrong guy to ask. It's not my LGS. You should ask the crew that travels to every RCQ and DMG shirts what they think of Dragon Master Games. But regardless of any of that, this is where Ken's journey started. Thousands of journeys start at shops just like these across the country. Not all of them take you to Worlds. That would be crazy. Ken parlayed his RCQ win into 2 RC Top 8s, 4 Pro Tours, and a Top 16 at Worlds. It'll be really exciting to see what he's able to accomplish on the Pro Tour next year. Wait. He's not qualified? For anything? You mean I gotta play in RCQs with this You gotta be fucking kidding me. Man, really? A top 16 at Worlds doesn't connect you to anything? Jesus. I mean, looking back at the year Ken had, this is a great year, especially given that it started in an LGS. Sure, his Pro Tours weren't great, but, dude spiked 2 RCs, played in 4 Pro Tours, finished 12th at fucking Worlds, and that's it? That's really it? Jesus. Okay, so wait. What does that mean for the rest of us? Well, for starters, it means that being on the Pro Tour train, chaining together qualifications without necessarily needing to spike a top finish, it's probably a relic of the past. Without Grand Prix, the only thing there is keeping you on the Pro Tours are Pro Tours, and there are only 4 of them a year. So, if you're not spiking one, you're probably falling off. Look, if you wanted to convince me that pre-MPL organized play was perhaps too oriented towards player retention, I could buy that. But this is so oriented away from retaining anyone that it's kind of weird for it to exist at all. Honestly, what's the point? Competitive Magic has always been about stratifying your wins correctly, but this just seems ridiculous. Does the Pro Tour exist to market the cards? Because there are surely more efficient ways to market Magic cards than by showing a Magic Jar. Let's face it, the tiny sliver, and it is a tiny sliver, just to be clear, of the player base the Pro Tour appeals to is hopelessly addicted to Magic. They might pick up Flesh and Blood or Lorcana and give those games a spin, but let's be real, they're not going anywhere. I make YouTube videos about the history of the fucking Pro Tour, which makes me someone who should bias heavily toward keeping the institution around. But if this is what the Pro Tour is going to be, a TCG version of The Simpsons doomed to just lumber around, trading off its reputation from the 90s for all eternity, then why not just kill it? If it's not profitable, if it doesn't impact the bottom line, and the only people who would miss it are toxic assets to begin with, just cut us loose. But if it is a thing that matters, even if its impact on the brand isn't necessarily measurable, then figure this shit out, because I don't want to play against fucking Ken in any more RCQs.